Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. This actually is the last of our CPD sessions, and it is tonight in geography. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome Nicholas Meek. He is from Haberdashers Monmouth School for Girls, and he is one of our geography setters. The aim of these sessions is to support you delivering the new specifications for CE. And in this session, Nick is going to be taking you through a real deep dive into the new specification to help you get to grips with it. And of course, ask any questions you might have. I've got some that you guys sent to me earlier on, but absolutely feel free to ask us any questions in this session. Our aim at ISEB is to consistently improve our assessments at every opportunity. So in the next session, we will be reflecting on the first year of teaching the new spec, preparing for year 2, and also looking at fieldwork opportunities and local investigations. And that session will take place in June. So Nick will join us again on June the 22nd, and we really hope that you can come along to that session as well as tonight. And there is actually an early bird discount on Eventbrite as we speak. So do make sure you go and book your tickets. June will be wonderful. I hope it's sunny at that point, and we will look forward to seeing you then. It's just a quick reminder that ISEB has gone very digital, and you can join us now on social media. So if you go to @ISEB Awards on any channels, you will be able to find us, become our friend, say hello, and also keep asking us questions. Stay in touch and let us know what you think about the things that we are doing. Once Nick's session's finished, as I said, there's time for questions. So please use the chat function in YouTube. Now, if you're struggling to get into that, you need to either log in to YouTube or Google, and you will find that chat function becomes available. So ask us any questions in there. What I will do is keep track of them as the session goes along, and make sure we ask all of those to Nick at the end so that you get your voice heard. So without much further ado, I am delighted to hand you over to Nicholas Meek.
Good afternoon, all. From a sunny Monmouth, we eventually got some sun today, although it's been quite chilly all day. So welcome to this session on the new CE Geography Specification. I've pitched it to all geographers, people who've been using the specification for some time, for new people to the specification. Some of my slides come straight out of the syllabus. So, apologies if you've been teaching the syllabus for some years. It will be quite familiar, but for some of you, it will be fairly new, perhaps, but hopefully there's something for everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the session. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reflecting on year 1 of the new specification and thinking about the preparation you need to be doing for year 2. We'll also be looking at some fieldwork ideas and thinking about how fieldwork is integral to CE geography, and as I said, looking to the future. Fantastic. Right. Okay. So I've decided to organize this presentation into 4 parts. An overview of the new CE 13 Plus geography specification, some of the key features. Part 2, reflecting on the first year of teaching the new specification, just my thoughts. I'm sure you've got lots of others, and please do sort of send them to ISEB. And thinking about preparation for year 2. Part 3 is looking at fieldwork. We've all been impacted by COVID significantly over the last couple of years, and I'll be getting you sort of thinking about sort of fieldwork options and possibly some local fieldwork options that you might not have thought about. And I'll give you an example of what I've been doing here in Monmouthshire, in Monmouth. Part 4, impacts of COVID, advice for the forthcoming examinations. I'm sure you'll have lots of sort of nervous students out there, and just some ideas of how to prepare your pupils for the forthcoming summer examinations. Okay, so the new specification. So these next couple of slides are just really sort of trying to sell the CE course, really, what it's going to give your students, the importance of geography. So in terms of the CE specification, it's designed to equip your students, obviously, for their forthcoming examinations, the 13 plus, but also for their lifelong, hopefully, love of geography into the future for GCSE and A level in terms of their subject knowledge, concepts and skills, and they'll be able to then to apply those to any new situations they come across and examples. We want our students to be enthusiastic learners who are open to new ideas and experience. That curiosity is so important, and getting them to your students to ask lots and lots of questions is essential. Do feedback your views and opinions and experiences. There is going to be, well, it's happening at the moment, a new website, an ISEB website, and a new sort of teacher area where teachers will be able to sort of send information, send ideas, sort of like a chat room, really. And there'll be one of those for geography in the near future, I've been informed. And so we'd love to hear then, or even before then, how you've accommodated the changes to this new syllabus. Do you need any further help and guidance? And positive experiences and success stories. They're always good to hear. So the benefits of geography, well, I'm preaching to the converted, I know, but we want our students to read around, to research around the subject area. The lessons and the textbooks only can cover so much. We want our pupils to have the confidence to think, to use lots of different forms of evidence, to make up their minds, their own views and opinions, to be resilient learners as well. That's so important in this current the time we are in, to have the skills, not just geographical skills, but the skills where they're able to work independently and also collaboratively, and to understand how geography sits within the school curriculum and its connections with other subjects. That's so important. And also to appreciate the sort of the cultural and environmental links that geography has as well, and empathy that we want to instill in our students, and linking that to place and their understanding of themselves within the world. And that links quite nicely with the next Geography CPD on the 22nd of June, where I'm going to be looking at geography in the whole curriculum, school curriculum, looking at issues like climate change, sustainability, and EDI, which is increasingly being talked about, equality, diversity, and inclusion. So in terms of the syllabus, the sort of key features, again, this is sort of plugging CE, I know, but it does present a wide range of opportunities for teaching and learning. So it does offer many opportunities, although obviously the syllabus is there, but how that's delivered is really up to you. It encourages the teaching of a wide range of geographical skills, obviously, and knowledge and understanding of the world. That's integral to the subject, I know. The flexibility of this specification means that you can start it a little bit earlier, perhaps in some elements in years 5 and 6, and that's highlighted in the specification. And that will obviously give you more time to fit in what you need to be, not what you need to teach before the examinations come up. And with the new specification, there's definitely been some changes. I'm sure you have seen. The move away from rote learning case studies is obviously a step in the right direction. The idea of students having to learn lots and lots of case studies is slowly changing. It's definitely changed in CE Geography. It's changing in GCSE. It's definitely changed at A level. And my experience is it's definitely changed there. And in the A level specifications, the new specifications, they talk about sort of slim case studies. They don't want students to be sort of reeling off one case study after another in extended answers. They want students to be applying sort of multiple case studies, slim case studies to answer questions. So that is definitely a step in the right direction in terms of my opinion. So other changes that have taken place, I'll just quickly run through these. Weathering and the types of erosion, although it's useful for your students to understand these terms, Detailed knowledge of the different types of erosion is not now necessary. Also, as I just said, the rote learning of lots and lots of case studies. I think it's important that obviously we look at examples through our teaching, but not to expect students obviously now to have to learn lots of factual information. Also, the requirement to draw diagrams, it has been removed from the examinations, although certain questions, and we were discussing this at a recent examiners meeting, certain questions lend themselves to the drawing of an annotated diagram. For example, we were discussing waterfall formation, and in such a question, students could write a paragraph on formation, but equally they could draw a well annotated diagram, and that should gain full marks. So although diagrams have sort of gone, detailed diagrams learnt by heart, a useful diagram obviously aids revision and can be used still in an examination. There's also been some changes to industrial processes, economics, and some capital cities have also been removed. Other things that have been added in, and it's nice to see an emphasis now, more of an emphasis on environmental issues, local environments around the school, for example, or hometown or village, national parks, areas of outstanding natural beauty, on a more global scale, climate change, global warming, and associated hazards, heat waves, forest fires, for example, and also pollution. We're also encouraging schools where time permits it, and also finance, to explore introductory GIS, geographical information systems, Google Earth, for example, Digimaps, ArcGIS. There are many out there, and if you're able to develop some resources, it can definitely aid understanding of the world and support the fieldwork project. And the little blurb at the bottom, again, just getting you to appreciate what the specification is trying to develop in terms of learner attributes. This whole aspect of enjoyment and curiosity, it must be at the heart of education. Although there are many time pressures, and obviously the last 2 years with COVID and the implications on teaching and learning, we mustn't lose sight of that enjoyment and curiosity, and trying to instill that in our students. Independence and teamwork I've mentioned, and that's linked to fieldwork in particular, problem solving, a sense of place. I've mentioned sort of the wider aspects of geography in terms of citizenship and environmental issues and sustainability, and as I said before, a sense of place in the world, and a desire to know more, to find out more about the world. Global geographical knowledge is what we're really all about. So in terms of the assessment, again, no change here in terms of the fieldwork inquiry, the fieldwork report, that's 20% of the final mark. In terms of the written examination, 80%, that's a 60-minute, that's for the 13 plus a 60-minute exam. There are 4 sections to the examination: location knowledge based around maps, ordnance survey, map reading question, and then section C and D looking at physical geography and human and physical geography. There are many skills that the CE syllabus enables students to perfect and learn, from location knowledge, using atlases and world maps, through to ordnance survey map reading. And these are integral to the subject. These are lifelong skills. Use of 1 to 25,000, 1 to 50,000 scale maps, use of map symbols, grid references, spot heights, contour lines, and so on. These are fundamental skills and would support Duke of Edinburgh Award later on, and GCSE and A-level as well. So really, really important sort of lifelong skills that geography can bring to your pupils. In terms of further assessment details, in terms of location knowledge, there will be in section A outline maps. They could be of the British Isles, Europe, other continents, or maps of the world. And they will focus on sort of features and places, mountain ranges, deserts, rivers, and so on, as set out in the specification in the appendices. In terms of section B of the exam, Ordnance Survey map reading, this will entail the use of 1 to 50,000 and 1 to 25,000 map extract from the United Kingdom, and knowledge of map skills, as mentioned before, map symbols. So that will always be the case in the CE 13 plus paper. Section C, your pupils will be faced with some physical geography questions. This section will have 2 questions, which will be linked to either tectonics, earthquakes, volcanoes, meteorology, weather and climate, geomorphology, rivers and coasts. And again, students will have the opportunity also to use resources in terms of graphs, photographs and diagrams. Answers will range in terms of their length, some shorter answers, and also extended answers as well, maybe 5 or 6 marks. In terms of section D, human and environmental geography, again, there will be 2 questions, and those will be linked to demography, population settlement, economy, transport and industry, and environment, sustainability and stewardship. So there'll be 2 questions linked to those 3 topics. So they won't all be in every paper, obviously, but there'll be 2 questions based on those topics within the human and environmental geography section. And again, photographs, maps, diagrams, graphs will also be included for some of the questions. Those will be black and white in the paper and added to the color resource sheet if that is required. Again, a range of questions, shorter answer, maybe definitions, short answer questions, and some extended answer questions as well. The case paper, the Common Academic Scholarship Examination, the case paper, is a paper that I have been writing a couple of papers now over the last 2 years. And again, it's a 60-minute paper divided into 2 sections, both 25 marks. In section A, these are data response questions, will normally comprise of 2 or 3 resources and a number of sub-questions, normally ranging from sort of smaller questions to slightly extended answer questions. And they normally will be linked to a recent sort of news story, news event in the world, although obviously by the time the students get the paper, it'll be 2 years on from when they were written, but they'll be fairly up to date. So, it's good to look out for sort of recent physical geography, human geography, environmental geography news stories that might come up. In terms of section B, there are 6 questions here. Going back to section A, there is a physical geography question and a human geography or environmental topic question. In section B, there will be 6 questions from the rest of the syllabus, and those will be made up of sort of multiple questions. They may be sort of extended answer questions, potentially a 25-mark essay question. So extended writing practice is essential. Why consider the case exam paper? Well, obviously it stretches the most able. It encourages independent learning and research, that inquiry aspect of geography, which is so important. So that brings to an end in terms of the part 1, just sort of an overview of the CE 13 plus geography specification and case. Now part 2, I'm just going to get you to think about your first year of teaching, the new specification, and preparing for year 2. So again, I just thought I'd throw up a few questions and get you sort of thinking. And by all means, do sort of throw questions to us. We'd love to hear your feedback. So, getting you to think about the first year, what went well, even better if, and just sort of reflecting on how that first year went. Obviously a busy year, contending with the old specification and looking at the new specification, always a bit of a juggle. Has the removal of large case studies, learnt diagrams and other elements helped, given you a bit more time perhaps? Have you started to teach the new environmental issues, topics linked to your school environment, your local environment, school environment? Have you started looking at national parks, global warming, climate change issues in more detail, pollution issues? Have you considered linking your fieldwork to maybe a local environmental issue? Just thinking about Monmouth, just briefly, we have a transition movement in Monmouth. We also have Plastic-Free Monmouth campaign, and that's linked to the Surface Against Sewage sort of anti-plastic campaign. We have litter picking going on, sort of a group of eco-minded local people trying to improve our local environment. In the news, you might have seen concerns about the water quality in the River Wye in terms of agricultural runoff. So even in sort of sleepy Monmouth, there are a number of sort of local environmental issues. I'm sure there are similar issues where you are teaching as well. Are you also able to visit a local national park or area of outstanding natural beauty? That might be a possibility for you. I'm a keen advocate of bringing in outside speakers, and we've done this over a number of years in Monmouth School, Girls' School, to give a lunchtime presentation, offering sort of some sandwiches and fruit and cakes. Always brings in the students, and it's amazing, you know, what a half an hour, 40-minute talk can do in terms of inspiring sort of pupils to want to find out more about a local or national issue. Looking at year two, preparing for year two, and I'm sure you've already been thinking about this, amending your schemes of work, completing fieldwork projects, use of online specimen paper. There's an online specimen paper, a 13+ specimen paper, and you know, creating perhaps your own question bank using past papers as well. So I'm sure you're going to be busy over the summer thinking about and preparing for that second year, and obviously thinking about your field work as well. I just thought I'd sort of bring this up in terms of part two, getting you sort of thinking about preparations for the second year, and your use of sort of current news articles, news stories. I'm a really big sort of advocate of this. And as I was putting this presentation together, I was just having a bit of a trawl through BBC News. And I always encourage my students from year 7 all the way up to 6th form to keep an eye on the news, to have the BBC News app or a similar app on their phones, to look at the stories, to think about the geography behind them, to think about the connections. So important. And there are 3 stories, recent stories, or relatively recent stories, that I thought were really interesting, and in terms of their links to the new syllabus. So I won't spend too long, but I just sort of highlight a couple of things. Obviously, the Ukraine war, the geopolitics, it's the terrible sides to that conflict. But in terms of the geography, something that perhaps students aren't aware of is the importance of Ukraine in terms of global artificial fertilizer production, but also wheat production as well. And there are a number of news stories out there and countries in the Middle East and Africa who are concerned about supply of wheat from Ukraine. And I know that in Ukraine, farmers are becoming some very big landowners and food producers in Ukraine. Some operated from outside Ukraine. But they're increasingly concerned that this year's wheat crop will not be able to be sown, and that will obviously impact sort of wheat production going into the future. And also Russia is also a major wheat producer. So that's got links there to population, obviously food supply, globalization. In terms of sort of a climate change story. Again, there have been a number of stories linked to increasing concerns about storm activity. We've obviously had a number of storms to hit the UK in recent months, but also how climate change is driving sort of heat waves, increasing number of heat waves, and also resulting wildfires. And there was a recent report from the United Nations. Again, it's quite useful, I think, these news stories to get students to consider global groupings, stakeholders, organizations that sort of run the world, so to speak, or contribute to decisions. And there's a recent UN report looking at extreme wildfires and how they're going to become more frequent, increasing by around 50% by the end of the century. And perhaps in some places that we hadn't associated them with. We know about wildfires in the Mediterranean last summer, also in California, more recently in Canada, which surprised me, and in Siberia, but places like the Arctic, increasingly so. And that has a sort of a global environmental issue link there. And then finally, again, I'm just quite fascinated with this. This is a story out of China, Tianjin, and this is sort of a story linked to flooding and urban management. And it's a story about sort of flooding and a Chinese sort of hydrologist who was looking in a different way at sort of a heavy rainfall and flooding and what happens to that heavy rain, and creating something called a sponge city. So conventional, it says there, conventional flood water management often involves, getting water away from urban areas as quickly as possible, and perhaps creating further problems or creating problems further downstream, but getting water away from urban areas. But in certain Chinese cities now, they're looking to create green spaces, mini wetlands, planting trees to act as sponges to store heavy rainfall and to slow down surface runoff. Again, perhaps not a completely brand new idea, but I think in China it's fascinating in terms of the urban growth and change, and they're now looking at sort of innovative ways of dealing with surface runoff. And then just sort of plugging my sort of geography eco club ideas. I've been lucky enough to sort of run a geography eco club at my school for a number of years. I've amalgamated them in recent years, but they're generally quite popular, all age ranges, and occasionally you get the odd sixth former happy to sort of contribute. But again, the idea is sort of linking to current news stories, promoting current news stories, the use of online news websites like the BBC News, for example. And so this is an example from a little while ago, where in the world we're lucky to have screens around the school, and we can get these sort of put up around the school, and getting students to think about sort of places and current events, maybe doing a little bit of research themselves. So this was an image I put up with a few sort of clues to get them going. It was an international conference at this city, and again, some sort of odd fact is always nice to sort of put up there. Founded by St. Mungo, the patron saint of salmon. I didn't realize there was a patron saint of salmon until I did some research. And it's amazing what a little chocolate prize bring. And even this lunchtime, I had 4 year 8s come to my classroom. I'm not sure, I think I'm being taken advantage of. They all got the answer to a recent Where in the World. So I had 4 Freddo frogs to give out, but there we go. So I'm sure you spotted it. It's Glasgow. The patron saint of Glasgow is St. Mungo, and it was the venue for COP26. So again, getting students to think about current world events happening, and the importance of geography in their lives. And so there we go. So so that's something that you might already do, or maybe consider doing in the future. Okay, so moving on to part 3. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time now thinking about fieldwork, and obviously there've been a lot of problems with fieldwork over the last 2 years, disruptions due to COVID. We've all had to sort of chop and change. Perhaps we haven't been able to do fieldwork. We might have to sort of look at local options. It's been really problematic. Staff not being available, students being ill, really tricky. For me, I teach IGCSE Cambridge and still do a coursework, A-level geography. They brought back in the coursework, the NEA. So, we've had to be inventive over the last couple of years. But before that, even before that, my thoughts are that, the geography department haven't always been looked at in a sympathetic way from senior management, senior leadership team, I think there's always been a bit of a struggle, particularly in recent years, trying to get fieldwork up and running and to get the pupils out of school, which is fundamental for geography. So I've written there, in geography, fulfilling our commitments to fieldwork has become increasingly difficult due to pressures of school calendars, staffing requirements, rising costs. You might have in the past tried to run a residential that may just be too expensive now. So the COVID pandemic has forced us to rethink how we teach and deliver essential elements like fieldwork. And many of those changes have been negative. Equally, though, sometimes change is not a bad thing, and it makes us rethink what we do. I'd always dismissed doing some local fieldwork on Monmouth High Street as a bit boring. Why would I go local when I could take the students away on a residential field trip? It might encourage them to do A-level geography. And the last venue we were going to was Leeson House at Swanage, doing some coastal fieldwork. And why wouldn't you? It's amazing, amazing location, an amazing field centre. If you ever get a chance to go, do go. They're very, very busy. Leeson House in Swanage. So we just couldn't go. It was these last couple of years, and in the end, we've had to sort of stop going, which is a real shame. However, it did mean that we had to sort of rethink and reorganize our fieldwork. So just coming back to CE 13 plus, what are the fieldwork expectations? Well, the expectations are that candidates must collect primary data. That's fundamental. They can do that on their own or partly on their own or as part of a group. And so that could be of many forms, obviously, from questionnaires to surveys to sort of land use mapping and field sketches. You can't beat a good field sketch. In terms of secondary sources, obviously, local newspapers, the internet's got a plethora of information out there, perhaps too much sometimes, so you might need to steer students in the right direction. But it should never replace, obviously, primary data. Obviously, in more recent times, with having COVID to deal with, it's been difficult to get students out there to collect primary data. So you might have had to rely a little bit more on secondary data or past fieldwork data, and we appreciate that. But obviously, primary data is fundamental. In terms of presentation, well, obviously, the world's your oyster in terms of how students can present their data, and obviously, the more imagination, the better, so to speak. So, use of maps and photographs and field sketches, graphs of many shapes and forms, not 3D though, sort of sketch sections, use of GIS, which I mentioned earlier. Digimaps is a wonderful resource. Google Earth can also be used. So many opportunities to geolocate data. So again, this is from the specification, what constitutes fieldwork for CE. It says here, it's recommended that parts of year 6, year 7 schemes of work are given over to local fieldwork inquiries. That's obviously down to you, how you organize it. Microclimate is an easier option in terms of, it could be done in an afternoon, maybe students missing less lessons, could be done in the school grounds. If you're able to take students out, sort of local high streets, shopping surveys, local rivers, obviously a little bit more tricky in terms of health and safety and equipment, but those are always an option. And obviously coastal inquiries, those are sort of obvious ones. But any geographical work undertaken outside the classroom, it constitutes field work. In terms of, as I said to you just a little while ago, in terms of the purposes of the assessment, it's all about sort of collecting primary data, and we need to see a clear title and one or more clear key questions or hypotheses. The fieldwork should be linked to the specification as much as possible, but it does say in the syllabus that it can also extend into topics beyond the specification. And if you're not sure, then obviously contact senior schools that you are in work and collaboration with. The most important element is that pupils connect with the outdoor environment, and that's sort of fundamental. It's field work for me is memories, and I can't praise my past geography teachers enough. They instilled in me the love of the subject and the desire to continue. And I think if you're able to do some really interesting field work and get your pupils thinking, then really that's at the heart of the subject. So go for it. Again, from the specification, so apologies, I've tried to sort of condense it a little bit, but certain questions come up. FAQs, must each candidate undertake a separate inquiry? Well, the answer is no. It can be group data collection or individual data collection, but the writing up obviously has to be individuals' work. What are the basic requirements of the inquiry? It's got to be collected. The data's got to be collected outside the classroom. Primary data. The project must include all the sections carefully headed that are set out in the fieldwork inquiry assessment form, and that's in the appendices of the syllabus. What format can the fieldwork project take? It can be word processed, although in the recent meeting, the examiners meeting, there were some comments about the difficulties of getting access to IT because of COVID. So some fieldwork reports have had to be handwritten. I think that's acceptable. I've got nothing against a well-drawn graph. In fact, some pupils I teach in GCSE and A-level, I'm not sure how easy they would find it to draw a hand-drawn graph. So I think handwritten projects are fine. Obviously, word processed is something that we are looking for in general, but handwritten is fine. And or an electronic presentation, slideshows are permitted as well. What's the limit on length? Well, obviously that's it's got to be it's got to be a sort of a limit unless the it just keeps going and going and going, and we don't want to huge projects. They just take up far too much time, and obviously there's also the marking as well to consider. But we're looking at about 1,000 words in length, excluding labeling and diagrams and references. About 10 pages of A4 in electronic format presentation style, about 10 minutes, maybe 20 slides if a student's using PowerPoint. And time, well, as time is so crucial these days, and we never seem to have enough time. But in terms of time to be taken, at least a day of data collection. I do 2 afternoons for my year 10s in Monmouth. And in terms of sort of write up, well, within school to support the pupils, and we advocate no longer than half a term to complete. Again, I'll just quickly go over this. Dates and marking. The deadlines are there in terms of the 15th for project submission, the 15th of October, the 15th of January, the 15th of March. The mark scheme is in the specification. And you can see that it's weighted towards the methodology, the results, the presentation of data, the data analysis, obviously so important. Incorporating, looking for patterns and trends in the data, incorporating some data into that analysis, and then in the conclusion going back to the title and key questions or hypotheses. And there's also 8 marks for fieldwork expertise as well. So encouraging the students to go above and beyond and work as a team and to develop their skills. In terms of a local fieldwork example, I'm more than happy to, if you'd like a copy of my Word document, the fieldwork I carry out, or get my GCSE group to carry out in Monmouth. But we had to create this because we couldn't carry on going to Swanage to do our coastal fieldwork, and so we created quite quickly and refined it over a year or so, a local fieldwork example of looking at the local high street, an investigation of Monmouth's retail sector. How healthy is Monmouth's high street? And you can see from the news article, it's topical. This is from September 2021. Almost 50 shops a day disappear from the high street. So your pupils will know this is happening in their locality, and on their wider journeys they would have seen a number of sort of vacant shops. I'm sure they would have seen it on sort of news, on newspapers. So what we do is we present 4 hypotheses. All students look at number 1, Monmouth is a hometown and not a clone or border town. And then there are 3 other hypotheses, and students will choose one of those. So there's an element of independence there. They can choose one of the other 3 hypotheses. The number of vacant charity shops, coffee shops, is having a negative influence on the town. The quality of Monmouth's environment is vital to the future of the high street. And then finally, number 4, Monmouth is perceived to be a good place to visit and shop. So we tried to keep it interesting, but not overly complicated. And it's worked really well. We've had 2 years now, and we've been really impressed this year with the quality of the reports that the students have been able to produce. One element of this fieldwork investigation of Monmouth High Street is this clone town survey, and I'd not really come across it before. And again, this is what I was trying to sort of get across to you, that sometimes change isn't a bad thing, and there's always something new to learn. So I was quite interested in this. It's promoted by the RGS. There's a web link at the bottom of the slide there, and it may look complicated, but if you take students through it, it's not that tricky, actually. It's a bit of maths, a bit of statistics, a bit of number work. It's a bit more, it's a bit of sort of complexity there. So it's a bit more than just another pie chart. But I really like it. And it makes them think about sampling, which 50 shops do they select from their land use survey. The idea is that students select 50 shops. There are a number of different types of shop, and depending on how many are selected, you times that by 5, and then for every independent shop, you times that by 50, and then for every chain store, you times it by 5, and then you divide by 50, and you end up with a score. If I've explained that carefully enough. So a score between 0 and 60. And the idea, obviously, is the proportion of independent shops compared with chain stores will either give you clone town, border town, or hometown. The idea is if you've got slightly more independent shops, you'll be in more of a hometown with more of a sort of homely feel, and you'll be more desirable place to perhaps go and visit, particularly for tourists. In terms of clone towns, dominated by chain stores, and again, almost sort of you could be in any town centre across the UK. And then obviously we've got in between that sort of a border town. Back in 2000, I think it was 2005, Monmouth was sort of highlighted in the Guardian newspaper as being a hometown. And sort of the students' research in recent years have shown that it's sort of crept into border town as the high street has changed. So maybe you'll think about maybe getting your students to look at a clone town survey. There are obviously many other primary data methods, and it's not for me to tell you how to do a local high street sort of investigation. But we use land use surveys. You managed to use an old Goad map, but equally you could use digimaps of the high street, and I chose 10 locations spread out some of the top, middle, and bottom of the town. And at those locations, students did a pedestrian count, a traffic flow, noise level. They downloaded a decibel app to their phones, which was quite cool, and also an environmental survey, a bipolar survey. We tried to do some questionnaires of shoppers, getting their viewpoints, and students managed to get one or two of those. It was tricky, but also some independent shop owner interviews. But what we did do with the questionnaires is we used we put a sort of Microsoft form questionnaire out there, and managed to get over 100 responses from teachers and selected year groups. So that's another way of gathering some questionnaire data when obviously COVID presents problems. And then finally, obviously, photographic evidence, often underused, and a really good use of mobile phones, particularly with taking photographs of graffiti, litter, quality of the environment, traffic, and so on. So just to sort of come towards an end of this bit of the presentation, what I wanted to say, and I'm sure you're aware of this, there's plenty of great geography on your doorstep. And, who would think that sleepy little Monmouth, there's so much going on. We've got our local newspaper highlighting, boarded up shops, a complete and utter eyesore. It has got a new front, so to speak, but it's still empty. I mean, this is 3-4 years on. We've got the local campaign, We Shop in Monmouth, trying to get people to come into Monmouth as opposed to going to other local shopping areas. We've got Newport on the door. We've got Cwmbran, although that's declining. So is Newport to some extent. We've got Cardiff, we've got Bristol. Trying to get shoppers to come back into Monmouth to support local shop owners in particular, and to perhaps reconsider always buying online. So there we go. So lots of geography there right on your doorstep. Obviously, you need the time to think of these, to create a new investigation, a new piece of fieldwork. It does take time, but if you're able to do that, I think there are many possibilities out there. So go for it. Right. Okay. So let's move on to the final part of the presentation, and looking at the impacts of obviously of COVID, advice for forthcoming examinations, and there was an ISEB preparation document released for geography, which I'm just highlighting here. I'm sure you've already seen it. So, excuse me. There is no change to the published dates for the written geography examinations this summer. And so for the 13 plus, it's Thursday the 9th of June. It's a 1-hour paper. For the case paper, it's on Tuesday the 3rd of May, another 1-hour paper. And in order to reduce stress levels and revision demands, the advice has been not for students to revise lots and lots and lots of case studies, but to focus in on one in particular for a specific volcanic eruption or an earthquake. So that the idea behind that is to sort of ease that burden of revision, and obviously to take into account disrupted teaching and learning and absence from school. So I'm sure you've seen that already. Also advice for fieldwork, for the fieldwork investigation. So this is for summer 2022. The expectation this year, given fewer COVID restrictions and absences, I know it's still out there. We've got a number of students who are absent from our school and teachers at the moment. It's not gone away. But in terms of the possibility of doing some fieldwork, the expectation is that there have been more opportunities, and that fieldwork investigations should have been conducted to your best ability. Where the fieldwork investigations have been completed and in consultation with senior schools, teacher-assessed grades from prep schools will be permitted. Fieldwork marks out of 20 should be added to those of the written paper, which is out of 20, to create a percentage score. Should the written papers be marked externally by senior schools, then only the fieldwork marks awarded by the teacher needs to be submitted to the senior schools and not the full written projects. And if schools have been unable to complete the fieldwork investigations, the candidates' marks for the written geography paper should be adjusted to a percentage mark. And obviously, I'm sure you will be contacting, if this is the case, contacting the senior schools to explain this. Also on the preparation document for summer 2022, the marking of scripts, whether exam papers are marked internally by prep schools or externally by senior schools, markers should adhere to the mark schemes. Lots of advice there, and hopefully useful for teaching later on. For the case paper, again, scholars need to cover the full range of topics and skills specified within the published syllabus. So that's important, obviously, and to note that adjustments in place for fieldwork investigations for 13 plus CE also apply to case. Finally, and I was thinking how to complete this, and again, I hope you don't find this condescending or preaching to the converted, but just some ideas. I'm sure you've been thinking along the same lines, but just some ideas that I've and techniques and methods that I've used over the years, just trying to prepare what will be perhaps slightly more anxious students this year who have had a disrupted teaching over the last 2 years and maybe apprehensive about, well, obviously, apprehensive about the exams this summer. And I've used a number of methods over the years, depending obviously on the pupils in the classroom. Obviously things like revision cards, flashcards to summarize important parts of the syllabus. Again, those can be quite expensive from WH Smith's, but a folded piece of color card or maybe half an exercise book is always of use and gratefully received when I've given those out. Organizing or trying to facilitate some student revision buddies and mentors. You might be able to sort of do that, particularly for sort of quite nervous, apprehensive, anxious students, sort of getting the idea of coming together in little groups and supporting each other. Use of mind maps, particularly for visual learners, have always been useful. Some hate them, and if you give them the opportunity, they'll just want to do a bullet point list. But a good mind map is a really useful tool. It can get a bit busy, but for me, I like a good mind map. In terms of keywords, wall displays, I'm sure you've probably got lots of words dotted around your classrooms, but those are really nice sort of icebreakers at the beginning of a lesson. Just picking I've got some stuck on a cupboard door, just picking off a word and saying, what does this word mean? How does it link to the syllabus? That's always something that you could use. Obviously, there are a number of maps you need your pupils to look at, and to look at place and rivers and deserts and mountain ranges and seas and oceans and so on. So again, possibly using parts of those as lesson icebreakers. Which country, which capital, which river, which sea, which oceans. You might have come across Wordle. I was chatting to some of my sort of class about sixth formers actually. Wordle, WORLDLE, Wordle, and you get sort of country outlines, and it's a bit of a quiz, online quiz. That's something you could do. I know at the examiners meeting recently, we also were talking about sort of house competitions. Again, some schools make a big thing of this. If you can learn your place information, you can get house points. So I like the idea of that. A bit cheaper than buying chocolate. Use of past paper questions. Again, sort of a whole past paper can be a little bit daunting perhaps, but sort of chunking it up, giving bits of past papers, leading students through the resource, leading them through the question, getting them to talk the answer is quite a nice technique to use. And again, sort of facilitates the use of past paper questions. I love the Map Zone. I'm sure you use it. Ordnance Survey Map Zone. It's a free website. Really, really useful resource. And it's, there's lots of online quizzes as well as tutorials. And that's always a good resource in terms of practicing OS map skills. And then another one that came up in our meeting on Friday, examiners meeting, is Cetera, which again you might have heard of, but if you haven't, SETERRA.com. Cetera, SETERRA. It's 400 free online map quiz games. And I know some geographers out there have been developing their own sort of customized maps. So the head of geography at Farley School has been doing lots of work on this. So again, another resource out there, and technology, and again, if your pupils are into the technology, then they might sort of buy into that. Oh, there we go. Cetera.com, fantastic. So a really nice resource there. And then finally, again, I've mentioned this briefly earlier, but this new the new ISCB website, which is being developed with teacher areas to aid sharing of ideas, resources, top tips. So that's something to look out for in the future. And this idea of sort of chat rooms, I've used them in the past, particularly when the new A-level specifications came in. Really helpful, just ideas, sort of resources. Do look out for that. So that's about me. Sort of finished. I've got some concluding points which I'll just mention very briefly. Obviously, it's been a very busy 2 years. Whichever school you've been in, many interruptions, and still at the moment. And COVID is still out there, and a number of teachers at my school have been away recently, and pupils. But I think we've got where we have done, and I think it's been an uphill battle at times. We've sort of ploughed on and tried to get through the syllabus as schemes of work to our best ability, and we deserve a pat on the back. And hopefully your director of studies and your senior management leadership team will be doing this. It's vital to keep pupils calm and to encourage and support as we always do. COVID for some has increased resilience, and they've benefited from that sort of ability to have a bit more thinking time, and they've had to sort of get on, and some students have been able to sort of make the most of that. Others obviously have suffered, and mental health issues are an extra dimension that we have to deal with in teaching today. But we mustn't lose sight of the main purpose of our role in schools, and that's to instill, as geography teachers, that fascination for the world we live in, and the desire to find out more, not just for the pupils that we teach, but also for us as teachers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was excellent. I think I've learned more in that hour with you about wonderful teaching than I have heard for a very long time. That was excellent. So what we will do now is take some questions from the floor. Now we have two in the chat from Amy Clegg, and I hope I've said that correctly, Amy. Please could you go into a little more detail about the introductory GIS through the use of Digimap?
Well, good question. I think I'm not sure if I'm the best person to do this. I receive lots of emails from Digimaps for online courses that they offer. I'm not sure off the top of my head whether they are free. I think they probably are free because you pay a subscription to Digimaps. But I know that those courses are out there in terms of how to use Digimaps, not just simply punching in place names and bringing up maps, and then obviously zooming in and zooming out, selecting areas of maps. Obviously, there are historical maps, the satellite images. I mean, those are some of the very basic, ways of using Digimaps. But there are sort of new ways of using Digimaps that they're obviously moving into. And one of those is sort of use of Digimaps as a sort of very basic GIS sort of piece of software. I've used Google Earth, sort of dropping pins, attaching information, attaching photographs. I presume I haven't used Digimaps in this way, but I presume that's something on those lines, sort of marking out areas. Obviously GIS is all about sort of adding layers to maps and geolocating data. So I presume that's where Digimaps is going into. There's also, I'm just looking at my notes as well. If I can find it, I think it's our ArcView, which again is available, and I think I might be wrong, but I think it's free. But I might be wrong. But again, there are these tutorials that Digimap offer. So I would drop them a line and see if you can sign up to one of those. And I'm sure they offer some of those sort of introductory sessions in terms of how to use Digimaps as an introductory GIS. So that's what I would do.
Thank you. And Amy just followed that up as well with, is this something examined on, or just for children really to be introduced to or become familiar with online maps?
So in terms of examined, I never say never, but I wouldn't have thought there'd be a specific question on the 13 plus paper. If they're, if yeah, it's unlikely. I mean, Simon Lewis might come in and say, well, hang on a minute. I think in terms of the case paper, I for the last 2 years, and I think even before then, we've always had a question linked to sort of fieldwork. And I think with the GIS, it's something that's, it's not just prep schools, it's also senior schools, in universities. And there was a big fanfare quite a few years ago. And it's sort of been ongoing. I think the cost factors, the training, there've been some barriers there. It's really time, isn't it? Time to play, time to learn how to use it, time to create some learning materials. I think in terms of CIE, I think we're looking at it in terms of just getting students to appreciate, how mapping has moved on and evolved, and if they're able to utilize it in terms of their fieldwork project write-up, then that's fantastic, and they can use it for data presentation and sort of looking at sort of the sort of geolocated data and in terms of understanding their data.
Fabulous, thank you. Well, I will just, there's a question from Rupert Blenko, who just asked, who are we expecting to mark the CE papers this year, prep schools or senior schools? So I'll take that one very quickly, Rupert, which is that obviously our policy at the moment at ISEB is that these examinations are meant for transfer to senior school. So where a senior school requires them, absolutely, they would be marked by the senior school. What we do know is that the pandemic has rather changed things. So whilst we cannot change a marking policy in year, what I can say is that I know that increasingly prep schools are marking these, increasingly prep schools are required to mark these. And as Nicholas very correctly said, we expect everybody to use the mark scheme that is provided. At the moment, the expectation is that senior schools will mark them, but we will be conducting a review and having a look at how to make sure we're supporting prep schools where the pandemic has really shifted the requirements slightly. As I say, we cannot change that in year, otherwise it's not fair on autumn and spring candidates who have taken them, but we will be reviewing them and making sure we can get you some guidance out and start to look at this in our schools for next year. And in addition, Rupert's given you some excellent feedback on your notes, Nicholas, and I agree, I think they're brilliant.
Thank you.
So we will be making sure that people get copies of them, not immediately after the session finishes, but what we will do is we will package things up and make sure that all of our viewers get something after the event. So thank you very much. Now, I had some questions, Nicholas, if you've got 2 minutes,
sure,
that had come in before the session. So bear with me. It says, the new specification says there is no requirement to draw certain diagrams anymore, e.g. rainfall, plate boundaries, waterfalls. However, I am assuming they should still be able to recognize these diagrams and explain them, just not necessarily have to draw them.
Yeah, definitely. I think certain landforms are very difficult to explain. in terms of their formation and the processes through a paragraph of text. So if I was trying to answer a question on the formations of sort of caves, arches, stacks, and stumps, an annotated diagram is probably the best way of doing that. I mean, with some supporting text. The same with the formation of a waterfall, for example, or a gorge. So I think definitely use of diagrams, photographs and diagrams, essential to geography. I think if the students are able to support answers with diagrams, that's great. However, if they're not great at drawing, the pressure's off. If they're able to write a paragraph, that's fine, including some key terms and processes. So I think it's time consuming as well. I think the number of reasons to remove it. It's just more stuff to learn for revision, but it's also if I'm not a great artist, it's just not going to happen. And also it's time consuming. Some students would just take far too long and then sort of run out of time. So a number of reasons, but definitely keep using the diagrams and photographs.
Great. And the last question here, unless this is a final call for questions from the floor, if you want to put those into YouTube. This one, another long one, but bear with me. The new specification says types of erosion have been taken out. Later in the specification under rivers and coasts, one of the focus points is features of erosion. So, for example, would they be required to know that hydraulic action and abrasion are the main types of erosion responsible for undercutting the soft rock during the waterfall formation process, or rather just that the soft rock erodes more quickly, undercutting the hard rock?
Yeah, it's the latter really, where I think in terms of types of erosion, I think the idea of that sort of that's something that perhaps they can return to, well, not perhaps, they will return to at GCSE. I think if they're able to talk about the different types of erosion, and perhaps that's more sort of case, the sort of scholars, that's fantastic. But in terms of 13 plus, no, I think just the understanding of what is erosion and how it's involved in the formation of a waterfall, that's enough. And in terms of the different types of erosion, I think we've sort of put that one to one side with the new specification. So just to understand what erosion is and how it's part of that process of a waterfall being formed is sufficient. But if they wish to add the different types of erosion, if those if the teacher wants to continue to teach that, that's fine. But it's not necessary with the new specification.
Brilliant. Well, we did have one final question here, which is there a topic in geography that you feel children connect with best? So we asked this question in science a couple of days back, and they said, oh, space, without a doubt. Is there a most exciting topic where you feel that the children really come to life that sometimes is just wonderful to teach?
Well, I'm gonna plug somebody who I've known for a number of years. Well, actually, there's two things. If you are able to get to Cadbury World, go to Cadbury World. The geography of a chocolate bar is a winner. I take my year nines there. I know it sounds awful and that I'm probably bribing them to do GCSE, but Mr. Colin Pitt is the education officer. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and he will do an educational talk about anything you want at any level. So if you've got year sixes, year sevens, he's fantastic. So if you get a chance to go to Cadbury World, it's a little bit pricey, but do go. Geography of a chocolate bar, amazing. The second area for me is rainforests, tropical rainforests. I'm a big fan of coastal geography and urban geography as well. But I think, tropical rainforests always capture, the attention. And that can be linked into the syllabus in terms of the environment and deforestation. But again, someone you might want to contact is Dave Shaw, Rainforest Roadshow. He lives in Mid Wales, and he does a fantastic come to the school visit. And he'll come and he'll bring in some amazing photographs, artifacts, and a massive blowpipe and all sorts of things, rainforest foods he used to do before COVID took off, and he'll bring in tarantulas, all sorts of things, scorpions, and he just brings the rainforest to light. And he will talk about indigenous people, he'll talk about dam building, he'll talk about deforestation and what's happening to the rainforests, and link it to climate change as well, and you name it. So for me, yeah, geography of chocolate and rainforests, can't beat it.
Wow, thank you so much. That sounds exciting. I almost feel as if actually here in the office we need a Rainforest Roadshow. So maybe maybe we could get you and Dave Shaw in. But listen, thank you to everybody that's joined us online. A huge thanks to you, Nicholas, for bringing that subject so wonderfully to life and for these fabulous resources. I think we're all very, very excited about what you've had to say. And I know that I'm definitely looking forward to the geography session that takes place in June. I know what you're doing is you're going to bring some really specific topics to life, talk about things like climate change and sustainability, which we know are not only hot topics, but like you said with Eco Club, really starting to bring geography to life for students, bring it off the page and into their real lives. And I think you've shown us already some ways to do that this evening. So very, very much looking forward to seeing you again in June. To everyone that joined us, thank you so much for taking the time. We will be sending some resources out later on, but until then, please do book up for June. We will be there, and yeah, in the meantime, I will let all of you know if we have a Rainforest Roadshow in the ISEB offices. It sounds like the best plan I've had so far. But Nicholas, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.